Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Dovetails event for the Day of the Dead. Normally, we have it in the Scottish Writers' Centre, and we're hoping to do that there this year, but unfortunately, a certain event taking place in Glasgow prevented that. This is an event which is dedicated to that event, COP26, where world leaders are supposedly discussing how we're going to save our planet. There are certain numbers that are very important for people to remember in this. One number is the 400 private planes that flew into Glasgow for the summit. Another one is Joe Biden's cavalcade of 85 cars which have been driving him between Glasgow and Edinburgh every night of the conference. And there's a third one. Climate change activists have been out talking about practically everything except about the cost of war. War drives a tremendous amount of climate change. Here's my third figure for you. Global military expenditure rose to almost $2 trillion in the year 2020. Now, our arms production itself plays a great deal in the carbon cost of war. The largest 25 arms producing companies reached an estimated $361 billion in sales. Military aircraft fleet, over 53,000 of them. But there's also other things that happen, such as the wildfires that reduce the ability of vegetation to store carbon. There have been landscape fires on military lands recently in Scotland, Wales, Kenya, Alaska, and Australia. And of course, we have the scorched earth policy, which has been in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Between 14 and 44% of Vietnam's forest was More recently, forest was burnt in Nagorno-Karabakh in the Armenian and Azerbaijan conflict. So these things, as well as the millions of people descending on into different countries which are not set up for them, the millions of people on the move and the millions of people killed. If we can't stop the arms trade, we can't achieve any kind of meaningful climate change in our lifetime. So we have an evening of fantastic readings for you. Our first reader is Mary Jack, who is a former journalist and teacher. And Mary had spent many years either teaching or subbing, and she is now a very happy person because she is engaged in creative writing. Her work has been included in the Edwin Morgan Centenary Collection in Pandemic and Ungagged, and she was commended recently in the Federation of Writers Vernal Equinox competition for her poem Hypocrisy. Her poem is titled Storm, and she'll maybe tell you a little bit about the giant puppet which has been coming through Scotland. Mary Jack.
Hello. My poem's about, as Jean said, Storm, a giant sea goddess made of wicker and recycled materials from the sea, who was the product of 2 years hard work by vision mechanics formerly the Edinburgh Puppet Company, who built her in their shed. Huge laborious process, but my goodness, has it been worth it? I hope at least some of you have had a chance to see it because it's so emotional. And having seen her a couple of times, I felt compelled to write this poem. Storm, the giant sea goddess, has risen, and guided by her 10 puppeteers, is touring the land to broadcast climate fears. Her imposing 10-metre body strides out, flashing, blinking eyes, leaving no doubt that life on Earth is in danger of fizzling out. With polluted oceans, seas, rivers choked with plastic, warmed, poisoned, leaving fish dead and sea creatures born deformed, dying, ice melting, lands drying. Her wicker frame, oddly feminine, with its flutter of net and shreds of recycled remnants, stamps out her message that politicians and all humans see the error of our ways, or we cripple our planet and limit its days. Missiles, jets, and nuclear threats are worst of all. Those in power cause devastation to lives and lands with war's conflagration. Her silent message should not be ignored. Keep abusing Earth and face more fires, floods, starvation and annihilation. Don't deprive children around the world of their future. Obey me and keep them free from environmental catastrophe.
Thank you very much, Mary. Our next reader lives on the south side of Glasgow with his wife and 3 children, and unusually in Dovetails, he is a scientist. He is working in the renewable energy sector, so he is morally sound. But he is multi-talented. His work has been published in all sorts of magazines like Poetry Republic, Cadaverous Magazine, The Blue Nib, and he's performed at many events. But he is also a composer and plays beautiful piano, and recently took part in our opera project. We're hoping to provide a more durable form of that soon. Peter Clive.
Thanks very much, Jean. So yes, I am a scientist, and so that's why I'm going to be heading off to more stuff this evening at Energy Transition Hub. It's all very schmoozy, so I've got to put on like nice clothes, which is not my normal sort of plumage, as it were. But sort of in response to the whole COP26 thing, I did put together a collection of poetry about climate change, the end of the age of fire. Here it is. And so I thought what I would read is an excerpt from the title track, if you like, which is a long poem called The End of the Age of Fire. So this is an excerpt from that. We were orphans and we drank not milk, but fire. We hauled slick black cables of coagulated blood from the ancient arteries of the earth and boiled it in our towers to restore it to life, at least that one single aspect of its former life that we can use. It burns. We burn clotted scabs and crusts of coal, and 1,000,000 years of fire ensues over the 40,000 generations of our species, adrift and alone in our metal ark upon a sea of fire. We burned effigies of the mother we were told had died and abandoned us. We called her harlot, we called her witch. The tenderness of her incantations was lost on those who did not see the world the way her serenades described it, for whom the life she celebrates is a skeleton circus of the imagination. We explored her with all the intricate contrivances of torture, telling ourselves atrocity was autopsy, telling ourselves we were motivated by science, not selfishness. We dismissed her screams as the residual reflex of a corpse. We performed every unwitting violation, and the world turned sour as it stood. We cursed our thwarted appetites, even amid plenty, invented entitlements to allow us to ration abundance, and defended the inevitable injustices of our grim calculus at the barricades of revolution against rival reckonings. The fire vouched for every other appetite with the implacable voraciousness of its own, and so we thought it reasonable to consume each other as indiscriminately as we consumed the world about us, with no regard for what we damaged or destroyed along the way. And so our society became a process of digestion that reduced all virtue to the price it can fetch at market. And we were taught to tolerate this betrayal by betraying others, that this is the way of things in the age of fire, whose principle is scarcity rather than abundance, as the fire consumes without replenishing its source. And we emulate the fire in our greed, our recklessness, our disregard for the earth. We thought she was dead because we burned her. We didn't burn her because we thought she was dead. We didn't burn women because we believed they were witches. We believed they were witches because we burned them. And the piles of dead livestock burned to eliminate contagion, the beacon of Grenfell shining through the small hours, the artificial sun blossoming over Hiroshima, the chimneys of Auschwitz, all testify to the upside down logic of the age of fire, and filth spills in plumes from the bonfire and mixes with and marbles our clouds and bestows on us the most magnificent of sunsets with the ash of that artificial volcano that is our civilization in the days before the world's end, the days before the end of the age of fire. And when the end came, as it must, those whose job it was to keep the fire burning in a fit of petulance threatened to burn everything down and turned the fire into a weapon, and war was born, making real orphans among the rubble of bombed cities. We'd no more, but they burned the evidence. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter. Our next reader is Claire Phillips, who's been living and working in southwest of Scotland for many years. We met recently for the first time at our event at Big Lit, and Claire has written a series of poems about her friendship with a Syrian refugee, which is going to be up in our blog once the COP26 conference is over. Claire was chosen by Wigtown Book Festival for mentoring in 2018 and won the festival's Fresh Face competition in 2019. Claire Phillips.
Just before I start, I'd just like to make a connection with the first speaker and the poem about Storm, the puppet. I walked with Clarion the bear for a day earlier in the week, the polar bear that's been taken to COP, which was a very moving experience. But this poem's not about that. It's a very short poem, deceptively simple, speaks for itself, at least I hope so. It's called The Race, and I wrote it just before the first lockdown, but it feels even more relevant today with COP taking place. It has a simple message about playing our part, think, relay. The race. The sea, expecting us to take the baton, and we didn't even know there was a race. Her tides tug oceans, pull rain, it falls, life grows. We burn forests, drop bombs, can't see our place in the cycle. Who else could she pass it to but us? For the sea is always giving us the earth, handing over stones, whispering up to us over shell-strewn sand. Are you ready? And we don't even get we're in a team. And we keep dropping plastic in her lanes, slicks on her skin. Our lives a mad sprint, then a limp to the terminus. And we run alone until seconds are left. We laid on her beaches, the sun made us happy, the oil made us rich, and we didn't even know there was a race.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you. Our next reader is Alan Robert, who is a prolific creator of free verse. And I know that because he writes about 3 times faster than I ever do. He's a fellow knight. We've frequently exchanged poems well after midnight. His poems are published regularly in the UK and also through Europe, South Africa, North America. He writes in both English and the Doric, and has won a lot of success in poetry competitions. His work has been published in the UK, Ireland, Italy, India, South Africa, Kenya, USA, and Canada. And he is really an example of the interconnectedness of us all, really. He is a member of Dovetails and the Poetry Society, but also of poetry groups in Kent and Sussex and the Federation of Writers Scotland, for whom he was a featured writer in 2019. Alan Robert.
Good evening, I'm Alan Robert, and this is my pal Percy. I brought Percy back from Vancouver way back in the mid-90s. We've much in common, both Bisexuarian, both appalled by politicians' lack of action on climate change, and both fear that there's little time left to take corrective action. The wise beyond their years, Greta Thunberg suspects that COP26 is all blah, blah, blah. Media shots of Boris and Biden fast asleep at the conference doesn't bode well. My poem, Procrastination in Lost, looks at our sad predicament. Almost gone, destroyed. By the time we wake up, glaciers will have melted. Deep seas will be dense in toxins. Fresh air will be putrid. We can lie to ourselves, tell half-truths or none, camouflage reality, profiting excuses for the trauma, turn our heads away, blame. Our battles of intense greed wash up on our shores, plutonium, uranium, alongside spilt blood. We claim prophylactics for virtue, cover our face, cover life, sit in front of desolation as it rusts over years. Shame. By the time we explain to our children bereft of resources, of freedom, we'll have decimated the rest. For in the end, we have nothing. Scars cannot be covered by bandages of convenience, for one disaster leads us on to another, wasted. We point fingers at each other with hate and with hurt, the infirm and those hungry, with everything to lose. As we watch the sun setting, crepuscular arrives, though we cannot tell if it will rise to bring life to our existence, for one day it will not. Gone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next reader is another multi-talented person. I met her because she had been shortlisted in a competition I was judging in literature. But it turned out that she makes beautiful handmade jewellery in precious metals, gold, silver, pearls, precious stones, and she actually handcrafts sort of, and designs jewellery specifically for people. She's also written a wonderful memoir, which is about her family in Myanmar. She has a family history and connections there, and has written from her own first-hand observations, but also from the history of the then Burma, from the days of the British Empire and World War II through to the Japanese invasion and the present day military government. And she says that in writing the book, she discovered that her father's fairy tales were all true. Linda Lewin.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Jean, for that really lovely introduction. And I really think the point you made in the beginning about taking war into account when we think about the environment is absolutely right. And it's something that we should be thinking about more often. So my piece, A View from the Moon, is inspired by what I've seen happening in Myanmar, but I do think it has much wider significance. A View from the Moon. The moon lay sleeping and dreamt that she was naked. When she awoke, she pulled at the cloudy blankets to hide her embarrassment, and cautiously peering out from between the folds with one bleary eye, she looked down on her ancient mother. She circled ever closer until she was almost near enough to touch, and then, mute with horror, she witnessed the earth with both of her eyes wide open. Her beautiful blue mother was overrun with predatory animals. Some who were limbless and voiceless coiled their long bodies around coconut palms, while others, equipped with teeth and claws, relaxed in the jungle trees, slightly bored, eating bananas and ripe human flesh. Having satisfied their evil appetites, the creatures began to sing and dance. Smooth scales gliding over expensive fur-coated hips, wet tongues whispering in gullible lovers' ears. Money makes the world go round. Come, let us leave this steaming jungle and run away to tropical seas. We will float on luxury champagne foam and take our rest far from the filthy shore. Golden fish swimming in and out of our dreams. Come and climb the highest ice-cold mountains where the air is diamond pure. We will immediately raise them to the profitable ground. Join our animal circus, make your choice, laugh with us, live for the day, make war, not love. The earth grew older, but mankind never grew any wiser. The silver moon waxed and waned in tragic silence. She was a dutiful child, making no criticism. She continued to revolve in her sweet elliptical orbit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Our next reader is Leslie Traynor, who is well known to most people here, I think. Her work has appeared in anthologies, literary magazines, online. She is a Scottish slam poetry finalist, and she is also the person who set up Women with Fierce Words, which is a collective of women poets. I don't know if they're fierce, but they certainly have bags of energy, and we were privileged to have an event for them, which was a riot, basically. Leslie's film recently done at the Paisley Book Festival has just won an award at Craig Miller and Niddrie Community Festival. So congratulations to Leslie and all the women with fierce words. And she has also made a wonderful film for us, which was featured at our event in St Giles Cathedral. Leslie Traynor.
That's very nice of you. I was just reflecting on Linda's words about Myanmar and Jean's words about war. Having lived in a war zone and seen the destruction of an environment with continued destruction, that always sat with me, so that when I came back to Scotland, I've spent probably a whole career trying to get people to engage with their environment. And more recently, I had been following the tweets of, it was the Jerusalem bureau chief for the New York Times, a man called David Halfinger, and I put them all together into this poem. It's called Something Here Doesn't Belong. In Gaza, boys build kites from paper and cane, child's play until held in another's hand. These phoenix soar, clear the barricade, travel on a western wind. Flaming tails, trail laments, ignite parched farmland. Something here doesn't belong. Israeli tractors crisscross the smog, speed to smother fires. High in the sky, drones. Pilots train these falcons to raise their talons and tangle the tail of the phoenix. It falls down, down into hellish fires. Something here doesn't belong. Soldiers follow its descent through night vision goggles. Fumes flood their lungs as they tally their success. 700, 800 kites so far. Loaded with tear gas grenades, Israeli jeeps play tag with the fence. High above, snipers. An Orwellian drama unfolds. Something here doesn't belong. Israeli observers watch, film the protests through long lens cameras mounted on vehicles. Drones hover over Kerem Shalom like bees around the hive. Follow the passage through the gates of negotiated food and medicine. Out at sea, 6 nautical miles, fishermen are warned. No further, then 3 miles. War averted on Saturday, tension still high Sunday. Within Gaza, within Israel, something here doesn't belong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Very powerful. The next poem is my own. It may be a little controversial for some people, but anyway, there's no point in being a writer if you don't say what you think. This is called Listen, Said the Earth. Listen, said the earth, I gave you a gift and you spurned me, prettily wrapped in cloacal matter from bats, designed to kill the old and the weak among you. Did you learn nothing before? when I punished your war with millions more dead, influenza, disease from the stars, drifting through the air to choke you. You've scored my flanks with your forests and mines, ripped out my bowels as you drilled deep for coal and oil, sucked the air from my lungs with your cars and heaters, overrun my body with your spawn. Now, maimings, slashings, bombings, what else could I do? I need to survive as much as you do. I look after my own. Didn't you see I was looking after you? But you blocked my gift, made it mutate to something more ugly, stabbed me with your drones and your bombs, and killed your old and your weak anyway. You drove them mad with loneliness. Thank you. Our next reader is another very prolific poet, and also she writes short stories and novels. She moved to Scotland in 2003 and lives in a converted stables, which sounds lovely. She is the author of a poetry pamphlet, The Language of Crows, which is great. I've read that one. And her first novel is due out on Amazon soon. She was also the instigator and contributor to the anthology Singing Over the Bones, which is a collection of writing by women inspired by Wigtown characters and that area. And lots of her poems can be found in small press magazines and anthologies. Chris Nichol.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to read an extract tonight from my fourth poetry pamphlet called Ancient Anchors, and it's something I've never done before. It's a sequence of poetry and prose in the style of Hubbard, and it tells the story of the relationship between the Earth and her inhabitants from the Big Bang to modern day. And it's in 4 different sections, and it weaves together science, philosophy, spirituality, history, and environmental issues, and that's all conveyed through a variety of voices. And the voice that I'm going to, the short section that I'm going to read is in the voice of the Earth, and it comes at near the end of the book. So much destruction. So many ways invented to kill people. So many tests of weapons to add to the damage done to me. And by the end of this war, there were over 80 million sapiens dead, including 125,000 who were incinerated by 2 atomic bombs, from which many more would later die from cancers and radiation sickness. Life darkened to the colour of winter rain. Cities and countryside laid waste, my surfaces contaminated by poisons, blasted, ripped apart, and burnt beyond recognition. It would take me years and years to recover. Crimson glow of autumn, weeds creep up crumbling walls. New life emerges. Experience sits like dust, easily stirred up by a draft. Since that war, there has scarcely been a time without conflict somewhere in the world, whether it be civil war, conquered people fighting for their independence, or nations trying to extend their boundaries and gain control of strategic areas. The list is long. Malaya, Korea, Kenya, Suez, Cuba, Vietnam, Aden, China, Dominican Republic, Northern Ireland, Cambodia, the Falklands, Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, Kuwait, Israel and Palestine, Bosnia, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, all those beautiful places on my surfaces suddenly being filled with the stench of roasted flesh, death and disease. All the damage done with flamethrowers, Agent Orange, bombs, shrapnel, oil fields set alight, or crude oil poured onto the ocean. I despair. Yet I have to remind myself that not all sapiens are greedy, aggressive, land-grabbing, insensitive, all-consuming, revenge-filled bullies. They're not many, but some voices rise above the cacophony. Full-throated thrush song, honking geese, cawing crows, seeds scattered on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's lovely. Our next reader is another person who's very well known to everybody, I think, A.C. Clarke. Her fifth collection is called A Troubling Woman, though she is not that herself. She was a winner in the Cinnamon Press 2017 pamphlet competition with War Baby. And her most recent book was Wedding Grief, which is a beautiful collection centred on the marriage of Paul Éluard and Gala, who later became the wife of Salvador Dali. That was published by Tapsaltiri in 2021. And I think there is another collection to add to it, which may come out later. A.C. Clarke.
Thank you, Jean. Well, Jean asked me to read this particular poem, which is in fact from Wedding Grief, but it's not really about climate change because it's set in the First World War. It is, though, indirectly about the effect of that war on the landscape, which is, of course, it was devastating, completely ruined the landscape around Flanders, as it was called then. Any pictures you see of the landscape then just shows you all the trees broken down and so on. And this is really contrasting the violence of war with the peacefulness of nature, if nature is left alone. It's from the sequence in the book called Poet at War. The poet is Éluard himself, who enlisted in the French army at the age of 18, and it uses imagery from the poems he wrote at that time. Soldiers marched through the tall corn, singing in full bloom, singing, trampling it down. At practice, when he hits the target, it doesn't bleed. He sticks his bayonet into a stuffed sack. It's easy. Yesterday, he killed 10 dummies. Soldiers marched through the tall corn, singing in full bloom. Field guns lumber behind. The sky is so blue, so terribly blue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next reader is Professor Basha Fraser, who is an award-winning poet and children's writer, translator, academic. She's authored and edited 23 books, so makes the rest of us look very lazy. She's published a lot of articles, and both in academic journals and creative writing anthologies. She's also the recipient of a CBE, which I think makes her unique in our group of readers tonight. She was Professor of English and Creative Writing at Edinburgh Napier University, and all I can say is that her students were very lucky to have her. And she is on the board of Scottish Pen. Her latest collection is called Patient Dignity, and it was a poem from the poem she's going to read from that went up on our blog on the first day of the conference of COP28, and is accompanied with a very beautiful painting by an Edinburgh artist called Viva Pankaj, whose inspiration comes from her deep-rooted connection with nature. So very, very suitable for the current conference. Basha Fraser.
Well, thank you very much, Jean, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here with Dovetails, and for choosing this poem. I'll be reading from Patient Dignity. And I think I'll be going back to your theme of war, and I'm really one with you and Linda and Leslie and Anne, if I may call her that, rather than AC Clark. So, you know, that war devastates this world and has really led to a lot of climate change, which we don't talk about. And may I also say that countries which have been bombed out of existence, like Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, don't have the representatives they need today at COP26 as such, because there are no heads of state to represent them. So Silence the Guns is a sentence taken from today's, the 9th Secretary General of UN, Antonio Guterres, who says, to silence the guns, we must raise the voice of peace. And after the pandemic broke out, he issued an appeal, and he said, I issued an appeal for an immediate ceasefire in all corners of the globe to reinforce diplomatic action, help create conditions for the delivery of life-saving aid, and bring hope to places that are among the most vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know how the earth seemed to recover very quickly when the guns were silenced. Silence the guns. Can we call for a ceasefire to silence the guns and let peace and tranquility reign? Can we hear rivers flowing, the ocean waves tumbling, and soak in the melody of birdsong again? Can we banish the bombs, missiles, and drones from our skies that are sent from elsewhere, and reclaim our canopy like the land that we own, to enjoy sun and cloud without fear? Can we liquidate ordnance factories and re-employ researchers and workers to invest their knowledge and skills in a program where health and education become central to society in a new global pledge? Thank you. And can I also say I've been really enjoying everybody's reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Basha. That was great. And I think your comment about the leaders is absolutely right. The damage created in those countries. Syria had a major drought before the war started there, and now it's absolutely dead as a country and as an agriculture. It's led to a great deal of food famine, as well as all the deaths and the migration that it's caused. Our next reader is a stalwart of Dovetails. He's on our board, and he's a poet and photographer, much of whose work has been on our website. He was the last poet laureate of the Scotia Bar, which is a big distinction, I can tell you. He's published two collections of poetry, and his third, Might As Well I Can't Dance, was published earlier this year by Fire Opal Books.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be physically with you, but this is about as physical as I get these days. I wrote this piece especially for this event. It's in 3 parts, and this first part is called Orange. They told us, only you can prevent a forest. We sprayed every inch of that terrain. Fish died, rice died, trees died. It just curled up and turned brown. We dropped 20 million gallons of that stuff. They fucking ran like rats with nowhere to hide. Oh, ho, Ho Chi Minh, oh, what a fucking mess you're in. Man, it was a turkey shoot. Those shithole jungle tracks were overflowing. They were just overflowing. Orange only lasts a few days, then it's gone. You couldn't see it, but next day you knew it was working. We never considered our own would become sick. I have terrible acne all over me. Sometimes it's like all I want to do is scratch. I have nightmares. Every night the Huey crashes. We're surrounded by dead trees, big fucking trees with ugly faces, wrapping black sweaty branches around me. I can't fucking breathe and I'm screaming, and my wife wakes me up and says, "It's okay, honey, it's okay. You're dreaming again. Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep." Aftermath. She could not sit up. Her bones were so soft, like a rag doll or a puppet needing strings. Our elders said angry spirits caused this, lonely ghosts stalking our homes. Her mother wanted to kill her and sacrifice an animal. A few weeks later, the child died anyway. B-52s made these holes in our fields. B-52s with 51 bombs. It's like a whale inside. Jonah in the ticking whale, preaching death instead of repentance. Look how they massacred our land. Her neighbor fishes in the craters. She catches sardines with enormous heads and 2 tails. Our elders say angry spirits caused this. Lonely ghosts stalking children, rivers, rice, trees. We place small mirrors in doorways to protect us. Imagine seeing yourself as a demon. Addendum. Spraybirds, fly swatters, silver bugbirds, harmless terms a man might use to describe insects trapped in a jar, or a skyhawk airplane with glossy paint and smart decals. Power it up and off it goes full throttle into a warm blue cloudless sky. Operation Ranch Hand. Might get confused with a cotton-picking, Dust Bowl migrant traveling to California looking for paradise. Family in a boxcar, cooking grits and beans at the side of the road. Tom Joad dreaming he's picking sweet, ripe fruit. A great swell gathering by the river. They did not rejoice. Rose of Sharon's breast milk turned out to be poison.
Well, I'm sorry Ray couldn't be with us tonight, but it's a great poem, and I think he's the best dressed person in Dovetails, probably. Anyway, our next poet, no Armani suits, but a very fresh voice. Colin Rutherford has, he covers all sorts of subjects, from early members of his father to baseball to the First World War. He has 2 collections out. The one I know about most is Prentice Peace by Fire Opal Books, which anybody can order from me, by the way, if you'd like to have it. Both his and Ray's books, just email me. It's a very entertaining and moving collection. I'll just give you one quote from the great legend who is Donnie O'Rourke. Open mind, open heart. Colin Rutherford.
Thank you, Jean. Good evening, everyone. I'm Colin. This is a piece that I hope underpins Jean's earlier comment about almost the futility of we're all recycling things when the guys that are sitting in Glasgow at the moment or wherever they are thinking quite often about blowing each other up at the same time. So it's called Going Green. We separate the plastics from the paper, keep apart all metal from the glass. Our garden waste is stored in one container, yet still our carbon footprint's not first class. We strive to bring about a waste apartheid, create a newfound conscience, green is good, to save our planet, feed the starving nations, produce less gases from our process, growing food. The left, the right, the power lovers are working hard to gain the upper hand. Do they want all nations to be brothers, or is it something else perhaps, more underhand? Can you offset carbon from a rocket? Who measures just how green a war might be? These hypocrites and liars toss out their rubbish, sowing deadly nightshade when they should be growing peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very excellent point, actually. Who does judge how green a war might be? The irony of the amount of arms production which is going on in the world is that, of course, people like the European Union have all these protocols about emissions and so on. So this industry, which is designed to damage other human beings, is going to get certificates for cutting their emissions. It's absolutely nonsensical. Anyway, our next reader is Tom Hubbard, who is one of our more intellectual dovetailers. He was the first librarian of the Scottish Poetry Library, and I recently attended a wonderful lecture he gave, the Seamus Heaney lecture, about the interconnectedness of Europe and poetry and its role in connecting us all. He has been a visiting professor all over the world, at Connecticut and Grenoble, and also at Lavigne in Switzerland, where he was writer in residence. He's the author of 10 books of fiction, poetry and non-fiction, and has edited or co-edited many other works. He produced a book called The Devil and Michael Scott last year, from Grace Note, and his next book is coming out with Reimer Books, which is run by Ruby, who I think everybody knows here. It's called Invitation to the Voyage, Scotland, Literature and Europe. He says he's an Irish Scot. He's just recently got his Irish passport, so he can go through the customs if we ever get to travel again. Tom Hubbard.
Thank you, Jean. Grey and green. Tableau of appearances in the world's night. James Ensor's intrigue. Array of confected colours on mannequins, dolls, thick plastered masks crowned with fake adornments, recycled or probably not. At the end of this line of petty provincial subjects, a broken-jawed skull too inanely staring to serve as a memento mori. Ah! The king shall sup tonight on Elsinore's breweries in residence, braving the storm with barricades of flatulent cows, with proudly made condoms, recycled or probably not. Set your troops, Claudius, to remove the forests surrounding your castle for a clear view of your enemies. A spectacle. More diverting, surely, than that clever clogged Hamlet with his graveyard fantasies. But the sludge butters on the walls nonetheless, creeps up from floor to floor, starting with the dungeons. The unblinking guardians of the court advance the renewable energy of ignorance. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? The mirror answered with a laugh. Isn't it you, say bugger off. As yet, there's green. The actual secondary, green. The honorary primary, green. Goethe claimed it the colour chosen by folk for rooms most lived in. Come to his Faust, and there's a devil of a fella has his say. All theory, quoth Meth, is grey, but green's the tree of life. Sometimes a rogue speaks sense better than prim ideologues of the market or God-given rights to dominate the earth. In Scotland, our word for yearn is to green, as we yearn for what's beyond the monochrome. The green in military camouflage is the compliment that violence pays to abundance. Abundance that's the green we see in the rainbow and the myriadness of nature. In Appalachia, the altitudes loom with their blasted, blackened apparitions, their withered branches in vain supplications. In Veracruz, the altars display betimes each comic, candid, and adorned death's head, arrayed with coxcombs and with limes to ensure that people's dead are the less dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great. Our next reader, Stephanie Green, is also a mix of, she's a mix of English and Irish. She has an MPhil in creative writing from Glasgow University and is the author of 2 pamphlets. One of them, Glassworks, was shortlisted for the Callum MacDonald Award in 2005. And the other came out with Happenstance in 2015. She's a dance critic, and she's also done a collaboration with a sound artist called Sonia Heyer, Berlin Umbrella, which was launched in Berlin in 2018 and then was shown at Stanza a couple of years later. Stephanie has written the most beautiful poem to the aria When I Am Laid in Earth, and you'll find that on our YouTube channel. Stephanie Green.
Thank you, Jean. My poem is not about war as such, more about men's violence and how that is the cause of the loss of so many species and even their extinction. So this is one of the tragedies that COP should be addressing. This poem is taken from a true event which happened in 1840 with people from St Kilda. You probably know that St Kilda is an archipelago off the northwest coast of Scotland. And on this occasion, some men were stranded on one of the sea stacks where they went to collect seabirds. And the stack was called Stack and Armin, which is the title. Stack and Armin, July 1840. On its lower rocks, a strange creature, a little taller than our knees, awaited us,
her nose like a grooved beak, her arms draped in black by her sides. She dived and flew underwater, elegant and sleek. Hauling herself out, she shuffled, spliff, sclap. A curiosity. We'd show her off back home. It was easy. Lassoed, we thrust her, squawking, into a stone clyde. A witch storm blew up. Sea and sky lost in one howling blackness as she cursed us from her cell. One man picked up a stone and squeezed inside. From outside, we listened to the cries and thumps. As the screaming rose, we stopped our ears. He crawled out, bleeding and torn. A second man entered with another stone and crawled out, bleeding and torn. And a third man entered with another stone, and a fourth man entered with another stone, and so it went on until all seven, apart from me, had entered the cell and crawled back, bleeding and torn. The witch grew quiet, her cries plaintive. Entering her cell, I held her down and felt her warm, feathery breast flutter as I raised the last stone. I just want to add, for those of you who don't know this story, that of course it wasn't a witch. It was a great auk, which shortly afterwards became extinct.
Mm. Well, thank you very much. It seems to me to meet our criteria, absolutely. It's about violence and the effect on natural creatures. So thank you very much for that. Our next reader is a former journalist, editor, reviewer. He lives in the Highlands now and does social research. He's also written a biography of the Victorian city poet Alexander Smith. He is a former president of Scottish Pen and is full of great ideas for dovetails, so thank you very much for all of those. And he's currently working on a pamphlet collection called Anger Man Age. Simon Berry.
Thanks for that. The social research has fallen victim to COVID, I'm afraid. So these days I'm just writing. And so I came up with this idea, which I thought was appropriate, of thinking of war as perhaps having a human side, in the sense of having a voice, having a right of reply. Certainly war does have huge environmental impacts, but maybe we should consider our own responsibilities a bit more in this. This may be contentious. If you look at the four horsemen of the apocalypse, of which of course war is one, famine, war, and pestilence, of course, and then there's one called conquest, which I suppose you could see as environmental destruction really now. These all have a human element. They wouldn't exist on the earth if humankind wasn't here already. So the fact that we're, if you like, non-combatants doesn't mean that we're necessarily beyond reproach. So my poem is called Why Pick on Us, War? I don't know if the words are coming up, but I've changed them a bit since sending them to to Jean. So there they are. Why do you pick on us, war? Why us, the women who have done you no harm? We have not hurt you, yet our girls live in dread of you. We produce sons, and you take them from us. We are the ones who suffer when our enemy arrives. When you allow license to rule, we are the abused. Why pick on us? Why do you pick on us, war? Why us? The sea and the land and the air that support you. We carry your weapons, yet we know they will defile us. We create the air breathed by your machines, knowing they will obliterate us. Without us, you would be nothing, war. So why do you pick on us? Why do you pick on us, war? Why us, the technologists who plan a secure future with you? We who have discovered laughter in this slaughter. We are the reason one regime thinks it will crush another, yet our production lines and software become targets. Why do you pick on us? Why do you pick on us, war? Why us, the generation who seek glamour by signing up for you? We were told to believe in you, to end wars. We believed it would all be worth the sacrifice. We have lent nobility and poetry to your cause of war. Why do you pick on us? I am war, hear me. I am above such discrimination. I give unto each of you your fair portion of horror, of blight, of broken flesh, of annihilation. All such special pleading must now cease, so I may rest, leaving you with these words of caution. It was you that awoke me. Now, give me some peace.
Thank you very much. Very powerful. Our next poet, Peter A., is another person who's gone for the Irish passport, and we know it's perfectly well, so you can get through customs quicker than the rest of us. He is a great poet who won first prize in the 2016 Paisley Spree Fringe Poetry Competition. His poetry's been published online and in film poems. I think there's one, in fact, on our Dovetails YouTube channel. He's also been included in things like Lalde and the poems for Grenfell Tower anthology, as well as both our Dovetails anthologies. Last year alone, his poems appeared in A Kist of Thistles, Jamaican's wonderful book of radical Scots poetry, in Words from Battlefield, Poets Against Trump, The Angry Manifesto, Thatcher volume, and Black Lives Matter. He also published a pamphlet called The Art of Insomnia by Hedgehog Poetry Press, and that's a very moving collection. Peter A.
Thank you, Jean. The poem I'm going to read is a very short one, and as I'm the penultimate reader, I think I should take this opportunity to say how much I've enjoyed the great variety of work that's gone before. So thanks very much once again, Jean, for having us all along for an event of this sort. The poem I'm going to read is called After. It appeared in this Greek themed publication, Sci-Fi. It's also on the I Am a Poet website, which is a very, if you get a chance to look at it, there's very many poets on it, and each provides 3 poems, and they provide a sound file as well as a text for each of the poems, so that you can really get into them in a bit of depth if you wish. This poem is called After. After words, their last have spoken, and from here gone. Afterwards, it is said, cockroaches will make the earth their own. Do you see already some may be working to inherit behind the scenes, planning, preparing strategies, awaiting the end game, from which all cockroach types are due to benefit. After the black rainfall, after the slaughter of words and laughter, after.
Thank you very much. I guess we're all saying if there is an after. Now, our final poet has just joined the Dovetails board. We're delighted to have her. She is the author of 2 pamphlets and has done wonderful work in community poetry for many years, most recently in Craig Miller with the Thistle Scribblers. And she's run many events. She's a great adventurer. Her first husband was Chilean, and she moved away from Scotland just to live with them in Venezuela. She's now married to a lovely, supportive Scots husband, Blair Ritchie. She has been included in many anthologies and is one of the founder Women with Fierce Words. Her poem Wojciech, the Hero Bear, was the official poem for the unveiling of a statue of this bear in Princes Street Gardens in 2015. So thank you very much, Rose Fraser Ritchie.
Thank you so much, Jean, and I'm absolutely honoured to be now part of the board of Dovetails, and you know, I really am. I've enjoyed many events in the past, and there's lots of events in the future we're going to be really looking forward to as well. Yeah. As writers, we're really inextricably linked, and history were inextricably linked, and the connection to nature is incredible. And Basha Fraser talked about, you know, vulnerable countries that do not have a voice. Jean mentioned I lived in Venezuela for 9 years in my 20s. Colombia has a voice, Venezuela is silenced. And yet I know the people of Venezuela have voices. I've been there. They're people of strong spirit, you know. And another place, I have to say, that I knew, you know, a place, well, a city, a town, a community is Helensburgh, you know, and there we've got, you know, a nuclear missile. You know, the chakra middle center, the instinct, there's something that draws you to people. And nature, of course, is something that we're all connected to. My poem, Silent Killers, is about all of that. This is about the Day of the Dead and honouring the people that have died, you know, for us, you know. We've got to think about that. Silent killers. For when we might die, we cling on more to life. Noticing nature up close, our earth losing control, sea levels rising, floods, coral reefs turning toxic white in our oceans, sea creatures tangled up by man-made plastic, ice melting in the Arctic Ocean. We destroy people with wars. Destructive forces say, kill. Life is cheap and disposable. Sorry. The beating heart of the earth fighting to continue to breathe, the planet's arteries clogged up by 21st century silent killers. COP26. Reverse together now this climate change. Oh yes, I'm angry. Glasgow, thank you for hosting, for leading the world leaders. You have the fight and you have the strength. The ghosts of our ancestors turn in their forgotten graves, for wars fought in their minds to honor their king and country. And on this day of the dead, send them homeward to think again. For our children and our children's children are our futures, and let them know, let them live knowing we cared.
That poem says it all. We do care in Dovetails, and we thank you all for contributing your work and reading so wonderfully. I hope that we'll see you at our next event, which I'm hoping is going to be at Celtic Connections. We're put in a bid for that. I'd like to thank in particular Mark Cunningham, who has taken the strain of this event off for me by doing all the technical work, and I'm very, very grateful to him. Thank you all, and let's hope that people do know we cared. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.